Hello everyone, DMG Jim here, continuing our Read the Frickin' Manual, our audiobook for the Dungeon Master's Guide, the 2024 edition of it. We're finishing out the Chapter 6 Cosmology section. Chapter 6 Cosmology, we're looking at the Tour of the Multiverse. This is a pretty thick section. It's breaking down in greater or lesser detail depending on the layers. Descriptions of the layers, what lives there, what are the powers that are in control of it, some geographic or some environmental descriptions, some things for you as a dungeon master to use to craft adventures and settings and campaigns around. Forewarning, some of these are bigger than others. I do have a lot to say about the planes. I'm going to try to minimize what I'm going to say. I'm going to do a little bit more show, a little bit less tell. So, for example, the first one's going to be the Abyss. I have one of my favorite resources when referring to the Abyss kind of sitting in the background. So when we get done with the read through, we'll get into a little bit of commentary. These videos, I'm going to try to keep them around 15 minutes though. We might get into a couple of the outer planes, or we may just do one. In this case, the Abyss, it's pretty big, so we're going to do this. So the Abyss embodies all that is perverse, gruesome, and chaotic. Its virtually endless layer spirals downward into an ever more appalling forms. Each layer of the Abyss boasts a horrific environment that is harsh and inhospitable to mortals. Each layer also reflects the entropic nature of the Abyss. Much of this plane seems to be in a decaying, crumbling, or corroded state, and its corruption affects visitors. See Curses and Magical Contagions over in Chapter 3. The layers of the Abyss. The layers of the Abyss are numbered based on the sequence of their discovery and cataloging by explorers from Sigil. Thus, the Plane of Infinite Portals is identified as the first layer. Azagrat encompasses the 45th, 46th, and 47th layers. The Demon Web is the 66th layer, and so on. The layers of the Abyss table presents several infamous layers. Detailed descriptions of these layers follow the table. Left column is the name of the layer. The right column is where it's at, and real quick, brief description on on the layer. So the first one, the Plane of Infinite Portals. On Layer 1, corroded iron fortresses defend routes to lower layers. Azagarat, Krazit's corrupt, decadent city, is split across layers 45, 46, and 47. The Demon Web. On Layer 66, Lolth's web snares all and hides portals to other planes. The Gaping Maw. Layer 88 is a malevolent wilderness surrounding Demogorgon's ocean fortress. Thanatos. On Layer 113, 113, an endless graveyard hosts Orcus and the Sleepless Dead. The Slime Pits, Shadakla. Layer 222, a fetid realm of ooze and fungi, obeys the whims of Dweeblix and Zugtmoy. The Death Dells. Yinagu and his null servants prowl Layer 422, a cruel, desolate realm. The Endless Maze, Layer 600's Endless Labyrinth turns visitors into Baphomet's prey. So some details about each of these. The Plane of Infinite Portals. This layer is the miserable gateway to the infinite layers of the Abyss. Under a glaring red sun, the rocky ground contains gaping craters that are portals to the other layers of the Abyss. Other portals lead to Pandemonium, Sigil, the gate town of Plaguemort in the Outlands, and the Astral Plane, making this layer the best way to escape the horrors of the Abyss. Iron fortresses dot the landscape, home to petty lords and upstart demons that are as changeable as the Abyss itself. The portal leading to Plaguemort is tucked within a fortress called the Broken Reach, ruled by a succubus named Red Shroud. In the Broken Reach, those who can prove their strength in metal can stay unharmed for a few days at least. Layers 45 to 47. Azagrat. The demon lord Grazit embodies manipulation and cruelty, tempting mortals with the promise of appalling delights and decadent luxuries. He rules over the realm of Azagrat, which encompasses 3 interconnected layers of the Abyss. His seat of power is the fantastic Argent Palace in the city of Zelatar, whose bustling markets and pleasure palaces draw visitors from across the multiverse in search of obscure magical lore and perverse delights. By Grazit's command, the demons of Azagrat present a veneer of civility and courtly comedy. However, the so-called Triple Realm holds as much danger as any other part of the Abyss, and planar visitors can vanish without a trace in its maze-like cities and in forests whose trees have serpents for branches. Layer 66, the Demon Web. Lolth is the demon queen of spiders whose schemes entangle entire civilizations on worlds across the multiverse. Of all demon lords, she might have the most active interest in the worlds of the material plane and in the cultists who do her bidding on these worlds, but her interest lies only in domination. Lolth's lair is an immense network of thick magical webbing that forms passageways and cocoon-like chambers. Structures, ships, and other objects are caught in the webbing. The webs conceal random portals that snare objects from demiplanes and material plane worlds that figure into the schemes of the Spider Queen. Lolth's servants also build dungeons amid the webbing, trapping and hunting Lolth's hated enemies within the crisscrossing corridors of the web-mortared stone. Far beneath these dungeons lie the bottomless demon web pits, where the Spider Queen dwells with her most loyal servants, Yochlol demons created to serve her that outrank mightier demons while in the Spider Queen's realm. Layer 88, the Gaping Maw. The sibilant beast and the self-styled Prince of Demons, Demogorgon yearns for nothing less than an undoing of the order of the multiverse. A two-headed monster who seems as much in conflict with himself as with other beings, the Prince of Demons inspires fear and hatred among other demons and demon lords. Demogorgon's lair is a vast wilderness of brutality and horror known as the Gaping Maw, where even powerful demons are overcome by fear. Reflecting Demogorgon's dual nature, the Gaping Maw consists of a massive primeval continent covered in dense jungle surrounded by a seemingly endless expanse of ocean and brine flats. The Prince of Demons rules his lair from two serpentine towers, which emerge from a turbid sea. Each tower is topped with an enormous fanged skull. The spires constitute the fortress of Abyssum, where echoes of Demogorgon's turbulent thoughts resound through the halls, tearing at the minds of creatures who dare to enter. Layer 113, Thanatos. Known as the Demon Prince of Undeath and the Blood Lord, the Demon Lord Orcus is worshipped by undead and by living creatures that channel the power of undeath. A brooding and nihilistic entity, Orcus yearns to make the multiverse a place of death and despair, forever unchanging except by his will, and to turn all creatures into undead under his control. Orcus's realm of Thanatos is a land of bleak mountains, barren moors, ruined cities, and forests of twisted black trees under a black sky. Tombs, mausoleums, gravestones, and sarcophagi litter the landscape. Undead swarm across the plain, bursting from their tombs and graves to tear apart any creature foolish enough to journey here. Orcus rules Thanatos from a vast palace known as Everlost, crafted of obsidian and bone. Set in a howling wasteland called Oblivion's End, the palace is surrounded by tombs and graves dug into the sheer slopes of narrow valleys, creating a tiered necropolis. Layer 222, the Slime Pits. Also known as Shadakla, this layer is ruled by two separate yet equally repugnant demon lords, Juiblix and Zugtmoy, who coexist with little conflict. Juiblix, the demon lord of slimes and oozes, is an amorphous mass that lurks in the abyssal depths. The wretched faceless lord cares nothing for cultists or mortal servants, and its sole desire is to turn all creatures into formless copies of its horrid self. Zugtmoy is the demon queen of fungi and the lady of rot and decay. Her primary desire is to infect the living with spores, transforming them into her servants, and eventually into decomposing hosts for the mushrooms, molds, and other fungi she spawns. As the name suggests, the Slime Pits is a bubbling morass of fetid sludge. The landscape is covered in a vast expanse of caustic slimes, and strange organic forms rise from the oceans of ooze at Juiblix's command. Zugtmoy's palace consists of 24 immense mushrooms, amongst the largest in existence, hollowed into grand chambers and twisting corridors. The palace is surrounded by a field of acidic puffballs and poisonous vapors. Layer 222, the Death Dells. The demon lord Yinagu hungers for slaughter and senseless destruction. Nulls are his instruments on the material plane, and he drives them to ever greater atrocities in his name. Delighting in sorrow and hopelessness, the Null Lord yearns to turn the cosmos into a wasteland in which the last surviving Nulls tear one another apart for the rights to feast upon the dead. Yinagu rules a layer of ravines and badlands known as the Death Dells. Here creatures must hunt to survive. Even plants try to snare the unwary to bathe their roots in blood. Yinagu's servants, helping to sate their master's hunger as he prowls his kingdom, capture creatures from the material plane to release in the Null Lord's realm. Layer 600, the Endless Maze. The demon lord Baphomet, also known as the Horned King and the Prince of Beasts, embodies bestial bloodlust. If he had his way, civilization would crumble and all mortals would embrace their predatory instincts. Baphomet's lair is a never-ending dungeon with the Horned King's enormous palace as its center. A confusing jumble of crooked hallways and myriad chambers, the palace is surrounded by a mile-wide moat concealing a confounding series of submerged stairs and tunnels leading deeper into the fortress. Abyssal Adventures. The abyss embodies the loathsome corruption of the chaos and evil. A descent into the abyss is a journey into a hostile and uncharted environment. It's also an opportunity to confront the evil in one's own heart and to resist the temptation to turn against allies in order to survive. Heroic characters might make a desperate last stand against endless hordes of demons here, or they might try to avoid detection while seeking a holy relic left behind by some lost hero who dared to venture here. It's the nature of the abyss to contaminate the planes it touches. Opening a portal to the abyss from any other plane allows the abyss to create tiny pockets of abyssal evil that can eventually become so corrupted that they're drawn into the abyss. Thus, adventurers exploring a desecrated temple or a fetid swamp on the material plane can unexpectedly find themselves in a demon-infested environment, very much like the abyss, without ever having to leave their home plane. So that's it on the abyss. That's a pretty cool picture of the demon web. I like that art. Cool. Anyway, if you're here for the read-along, we're going to go ahead and stop here. Thank you so much for hanging out. Appreciate you, and come back for the next series. This section's going to be a long read. It is what it is. I expect people will probably refer to the videos when the name comes up, hopefully. But thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we'll see you soon. If you're here for comments, going to be a few minutes of chatting here. Cool. Let's get into it. The Tour of the Multiverse, the Abyss. These are very popular planes in that they've appeared in publications over the course of both TSR and Wizards' D&D run. The Plane of Infinite Portals features lightly and heavily in a lot of the Planescape adventures. Azagrat popped up pretty deeply in Expedition to the Demon Web Pits. There's lots of mentions of Grazit as far back as Module S4, Lost Caverns of Soth Canth. The Demon Web Layer 66, first and foremost, it's just hypothetical with the lore that they're going with in regards to the numbers. I don't necessarily know that there was any rhyme or reason when the numbers were assigned to each of the demon lords or whatever lived there back then. Giving them the story of this is the first one we discovered is true. Publication-wise, the Demon Web was the first one ever published. Q1 Expedition to the Demon Web Pits was our first official module taking us into the Abyss. So, anyway, you could go on and on and on about it. The first thing I want you guys to keep in mind, the Abyss is bad. It's chaotic evil. It's corrupt. It's evil. It's perverse. It's nauseating. It's everything bad about everyone manifesting itself physically in each of the layers. To a greater or lesser extent, some of them are super decadent to the point of just disgusting temptations that no one can pass by. Looking at you, Grazit and Azagrat. Other places, it's just you're being hunted for sport. Everything that lives there lives only to be hunted by something stronger that's being hunted by something stronger, which can be the Endless Maze, and it could be the Gaping Maw where Demogorgon and Baphomet hang out, okay? But it's all bad, it's all nasty, it's all gross, and you need to make sure that you're adhering to your Session 1, your Session 0 checklists, your good topics, bad topics, your triggers, your no-go content, because the Abyss is, in its nature, supposed to represent every single one of those things that could possibly be a trigger that are validly triggers across everything. It's a bad place. So be cautious when you're designing adventures here as a dungeon master. There's a lot of fun adventures that can be here, but make sure you're not crossing any lines. Make sure you're not, crossing any boundaries with your content or the presentation of the content to the detriment of the group. You're still playing D&D. It's still supposed to be fun, right? So in accordance with that, when we read through each of these layers, you were probably, as a dungeon master at this point in the book, at this point in the audio book, you're probably going, oh man, I could do this and kill him here. Oh, they could die doing that. They could die. Yeah, they could die. They could die walking down the stairway in some of these places, okay? When designing encounters, when designing situations, when designing dialogues and hooks, it still has to be playable. So use caution with encounter balance. Be sure that the hooks and the movement, the next steps in each of the quest lines, in each of the adventures, is attainable and survivable. It's supposed to be dangerous, and not everyone will survive. They may have to outwit their opponents instead of outfight their opponents, and more often than not, that's the nature of fighting in the abyss, of running adventures in the abyss. So you are facing a little bit more complex adventure and setting and campaign design when getting into the abyss. Plus side is it's infinite in nature. You have no shortage of layers that you can turn into whatever you want to house whatever horrifying evil you want, and physically manifest those ideas around that BBEG. This is your canvas, this is your toolbox, this is your Lego pile, this is your whatever. You get to build as horrible and rotten as evil as your players will allow you to put here. No guidelines other than what you have here, and freedom within the context of what your players will tolerate. However, if you're a little bit more of a lore-driven DM, I would suggest adding this to your library. The Fiendish Codex 1, The Hordes of the Abyss. This is a 3rd edition, 3.5. Sorry. I'm just trying to nail down my publication date just for... it's a Wizard's book published 2006, so that would make it a 3.5. Great reference material. Lots of monsters here, lots of politics, deeper descriptions of some of the layers, and more coverage of the layer in addition to creatures other than demons that lurk here, the Aubranths. So there's a lot of there's a lot of plots, there's a lot of schemes, there's a lot of connections between the layers of the abyss that the 5th edition DM's guide, it doesn't have the space to cover it. So if you're interested in more of that, this is a recommendation that I would make. Ed Stark, Jacob, Eric Mona, good book, really good book out of the 3.5 edition, game set, the rule set. Still great content. The numbers are wonky compared to 5e. If you get deeper into that, there are conversion guides that are available, but I'm more talking about taking the content, taking the ideas from here and applying them to 5e, taking the descriptions, taking the names and the personas, and making them work for your world. But we're going to go ahead and end the video here. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. We looked at the Abyss, did the audiobook a bit, and then we talked about some things to keep in mind when you're planning in your adventures here. Playability being the number one thing. If you can't play it, there's no point in building it. If your players can't survive it, things like that. Just survivability has to be a thing. Playability has to be a thing. Fun has to be had here because we're still playing a game. And the second thing is you have freedom to do what you want within the bounds of what your players will let you do, as far as trigger warnings, things like that. And last but not least, there is a huge library of information out there. This is one that I recommend. If you want to get deeper into the abyss, I tell a lot of people this is a great place to take the next step into it, and then you can start getting into some of the Planescape stuff from there. But hey guys, thanks for hanging out. Likes, follows, subscribes are appreciated. Push that like button. Let me know what you think. Leave us a comment. Join us over on Twitch. Recommend me to a friend. Help us grow. Let's get the RTFM out there. We want to read this stuff. We want to own this stuff. We want to have this stuff on hand for reference so we can build really cool adventures, so we can build really engaging worlds, so we can connect them into these awesome campaigns that are really immersive for our players and that we remember and play for years and years of fun. Y'all take care. Thanks for your time.